We are here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Monday, December 16th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're watching News Generation. Today, we're joined by Choi-ji.
Welcome back, Yuji.
Thank you, Ji. And Brookfrit.
Hello, happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. So we're going to move on to our main discussion of the day. It's Monday, time to talk about the latest topics trending among the younger generation here in Korea. South Korea has been making international headlines for the past 2 weeks following President Yoon Suk-yeol's unexpected declaration of martial law on December 3rd, the first time this order has been imposed in over 4 decades. While the decree was short-lived, it sent shockwaves both at home and abroad. And here in Korea, it sparked nationwide protests demanding the president's resignation and led to lawmakers introducing an impeachment motion. And on Saturday, December 14th, the National Assembly passed the impeachment motion. So, Ji, could you first walk us through what's happened and where do we stand now?
Sure. So in the wake of the December 3rd martial law incident, South Korea's youth have become very dynamic. And since the term because of this political turmoil, we've seen a lot of engagement. But just to give you an overview of what this incident was about, President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law unexpectedly on the 3rd, and he cited alleged threats from anti-state activities and claims of North Korean influence, marking the first such decree in over 40 years, as you said. Now, the declaration suspended political activities and restricted press freedoms and empowered the military to maintain order, sparking immediate nationwide protests and strong condemnation from opposition parties, civil groups, and international observers. Now, lawmakers defied attempts to block a National Assembly session and unanimously voted to lift the decree within hours, forcing Yoon to revoke martial law the same evening. And in the following days, 6 opposition parties introduced an impeachment motion accusing the president of overstepping his constitutional authority. Now, after an initial vote failed due to a boycott by some ruling party members, a second vote over the weekend on Saturday, in fact, passed with 204 out of 300 lawmakers supporting impeachment and 85 opposing. Now, this suspended Yoon's powers and transferred leadership to Prime Minister Han Duck-soo as acting president. And the Constitutional Court now has up to 180 days to decide whether to permanently remove Yoon from office, which is a decision that would trigger a snap presidential election or reinstate him, and leaving the nation in a state of political uncertainty. Now, if the court rules to impeach the president with 6 out of 9 judges voting for, at least that is, a presidential election must be held within 60 days after the ruling.
Right. So we definitely saw a dramatic change over the weekend, the National Assembly passing the impeachment motion, and we're still getting updates on the prosecution and the police charging and kind of asking more investigation to the people who are believed to have taken part in planning this martial law order that was short-lived on December 3rd. Now, besides all these big news that have been happening over the past few weeks, the reaction of young people, our generation, to these dramatic events over the past 2 weeks have also garnered great attention, right, Jihi?
That's right. So our generation has actually been known to be very disengaged in political activities. But since this martial law incident, South Korea's youth have emerged as a dynamic force in the ensuing protests, marking a significant shift from their previous political disengagement. Now, traditionally, young people in their 20s, including university students, have been regarded as largely indifferent to politics here in the country. If you ask someone, what do you think about this political situation, they would just say, oh, I'm not interested in politics. Now, this perception was reinforced by the low voter turnout of the 20-something demographic during the April general election, which stood at just over 50%. which was the lowest among all age groups. However, the recent political turmoil following President Yoon's martial law declaration has spurred a remarkable shift. University students across the nation have begun issuing public declarations and actively voicing their political opinions. And also, impeachment rallies held nationwide have seen significant participation from diverse youth groups, and this change reflects a growing political consciousness and a willingness to engage in shaping the country's democratic processes.
Right. So I think one of the most standout features among the protests that have been calling for President Yoon to step down and impeachment of President Yoon is the large participation of our generation in these protests and rallies, which is quite different from the reputation that our generation holds as being relatively politically indifferent from other generations. Now, Brooke, I also want to ask your opinion because I know that you weren't in Korea when all this happened. You were in the States. So how did you view all the situation?
That's right. I was visiting my family for Thanksgiving in the US when the news dropped, and understandably, my family was quite concerned when it happened. They were really hesitant to let me get back on the plane to come back to Korea. They started making arrangements, trying to figure out which family member I was going to stay with long term. But for me, you know, my cat lives here, my social life is here, my work life is here. This very show I had scheduled for the day after I landed. And I think many people in Korea were in a similar boat. They were wondering, what does this mean for me?
Right.
Do I get to go to work tomorrow? Is my social life going to stay the same? Are my rights going to stay the same? So everyone kind of had these same concerns, but luckily the martial law decree was very short-lived. It was revoked within a few hours, so I did not have to make any drastic plans to my travels, which is why I'm sitting here today. But my family is still worried, and I think everyone is still very worried about the fallout of these events and what is the future that is going to happen for the Korean political landscape. And it's kind of disheartening to look at because I've always said that safety is the #1 reason why I love living in Korea. And I do think that that's been rattled a little bit because now things feel a little unpredictable. But I do believe that with the fervent passion of the Korean people, especially the young people that unexpectedly have been participating very fiercely in these protests, I do believe that Korea will find its way back to some semblance of normalcy and security as a country.
Right. So both of our panelists, you both mentioned how young people actively participated in the protests this time. And it's not just the fact that young people participated or took part in these protests and have been very vocal about expressing their political opinions that has captured attention for the past 2 weeks. It's also the way they've been taking part. So, Ji, can you tell us a bit more about this too?
Sure. So they've been really embracing a very unique form of peaceful demonstrations. Young protesters have transformed rallies into vibrant events and something like a K-pop festival even. They were equipped with K-pop light sticks, traditionally used, of course, at music concerts. They've illuminated the streets, creating a what they call sea of lights that symbolizes their resistance and unity. Now, this innovative approach has garnered widespread attention, showcasing the youth's creative engagement and political activism. And in fact, I attended the rally in Yeouido on Saturday to gain first-hand experience as well. And I just wanted to be part of history too, regardless of my political leanings. And I was pleasantly surprised by the diverse crowd, as you see in the VCR, which included people from all age groups. They brought not only light sticks, but crafted picket signs with creative memes. And the selection of songs, as you hear on the VCR, were particularly interesting as they fit the atmosphere and situation perfectly. Some of them include like 손담비's 토요일 밤에 or Saturday night, meaning the impeachment happened on a Saturday night. Girls' Generation 소원을 말해봐, like asking for your wish, and they say impeachment. And they even turned on like the 다시 만난 세계 by Girls' Generation after the impeachment motion had passed as well, symbolizing a new world for everyone after the president's impeachment. Now, by incorporating all these elements of popular culture into their demonstrations, South Korea's youth are redefining protest culture, making political participation a lot more accessible and engaging for the generation. Yeah, and also other notable actions included people paying for drinks and snacks,
even
and bread,
celebrities,
whatnot,
right?
even celebrities, as a way of supporting supporting all these demonstrators, and as for them too, being participating in these rallies in different ways. And some individuals, they voluntarily cleaned up all the garbage on the streets. And I even saw some people volunteering to maintain order at traffic lights because there were so many people, large crowds moving across the streets. They made sure that people were crossing safely. And there was also 사물놀이, etc. It was really a whole festivity with dance battles, sing-alongs. As you see, 사물놀이 being the traditional instruments that we play.
Right. So based on your experience and the VCR that we've just seen, we can see the young protesters have definitely given a complete makeover to the traditional rallies and protests that we've seen here in South Korea. And she also slightly touched upon this, but several international media outlets also introduced this very mature, orderly, responsible, peaceful approach by young protesters. So, Brooke, could you elaborate more on this, please?
Of course. So this news was all over foreign media, with many outlets reporting on the very mature response of the Korean people and the overall almost party-like atmosphere of these protests, like Ji-hee mentioned. There were reports of people bringing their light sticks for their favorite K-pop groups and videos of their synchronized chanting and dancing to their favorite K-pop hits went viral on social media, not just in Korea, but all over the world. And I think that overseas observers were quite impressed by the fact that despite the freezing cold temperatures, people were willing to come together and express their opinions and make their voices heard. And Ji-hee talked to me about this earlier, but I asked if she even felt the cold outside, and she said no, because the spirit of the people around you, you're grouped together, you're all fighting for a common cause, you don't even feel that it's cold outside. And many of the people on the site of the protest said that they wanted to be a part of history, that they wanted to show future generations that this is how you do it, this is how you fight for your rights and how you fight for your freedom in a peaceful manner. Now, I know that some were concerned that all of these headlines about this incident would potentially damage Korea's reputation, which would be a shame given the fantastic year that Korea has had in terms of its soft power, right? We saw Han Kang win the Nobel Prize for Literature and numerous other achievements and accomplishments. So people were concerned that this might tarnish or stain that legacy. But others pointed out that this is kind of a silver lining.
Right.
And that is the fact that Korea showed and proved to the world that within a matter of hours, they could tackle this problem together. Within a matter of hours, lawmakers and citizens alike came together to block the martial law decree. So yes, it is a time of political turmoil, and we might have all of these headlines, but I think the thing to remember is that Korea is coming together as a unit to overcome this issue, and I do believe that they will emerge a stronger democracy on the other side.
Right. So they were brave enough to brave the cold and then go out to the streets and kind of fight for the value that our country is very passionate about, which is protecting the value of democracy, which is what our parents' generation and grandparents' generation fought for decades ago. And we'll be talking about more in depth about these K-pop concert-like festive protests tomorrow on NewsGen. So please stay tuned for a discussion tomorrow as well. Now, going back to our discussion from being labeled as politically indifferent, as Ji mentioned, to now actively engaging and even leading a new protest culture, this shows a significant shift compared to what we saw during the 2016 candlelight protests demanding then-President Park Geun-hye's impeachment. So what do you think has driven this change in our generation? Because, of course, then we saw young people taking part in the protests, of course, but now we're seeing a significant portion of them, right?
Right. We're seeing a difference because this whole crisis disrupted the daily lives of the MZ generation, threatening their career, relationship, and personal stability. So this direct impact served as a wake-up call and driving a surge in political awareness and engagement. So unlike back in 2016, they're more involved and making their presence felt, and they know that this value of democracy should be kept by their participation. And they're really feeling the political efficacy by being part, and they're knowing that they are the ones who will drive the democratic values of Korea by participating.
And I think that they would have felt more political efficacy after they saw this impeachment motion being passed. What do you think, Brooke?
Well, I think for Koreans growing up, hearing about the struggles and the sacrifices of the older generations, it was unimaginable to think that that might happen to them. But when it became a very real possibility that their rights could be infringed upon, they stepped up to the plate in a big way. We've seen students from over 30 universities all over the country coming together to protest and participate more actively in political discourse. So whereas we've been talking about the younger generation used to be seen as having this very lukewarm interest in politics, now they've got a lot of enthusiasm and dedication to the cause, both online and offline. That's a big difference between then and now. We have the internet, and the internet is a tool for fact-checking, for sharing information more efficiently, and for bringing new people into the fold. And so I think that this moment was really a catalyst that woke the people up, and that is why we're seeing a change in attitude towards politics.
All right, so now we're going to broaden our discussion, and we're going to invite a political science expert to our talks after this short break.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
We're back. Joining us this morning is Christoph Godden, Professor of Political Science at Kookmin University in Seoul. Welcome, Professor.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Morning. Okay, Professor. So our first question for you is, recently, as we've mentioned, we've seen a lot of young people joining rallies and protests here in Korea, especially since the short-lived martial law decree. So what do you think has motivated them to get involved?
Oh, I think your panelists have said it all, but mostly the short answer is a mixture of fear and hope. Fear because it felt like, as one of your panelists said before, that dictatorship has moved away, far away from Korean politics. And this danger, this authoritarian danger, is still very real, not only in Korea, but everywhere. Actually, you've got the same authoritarian, far right-wing, populist wave hitting all democracies with conspiracy theories, evangelists, and the like. And so Korea is no exception to that. So that's the first. But also the second point that I think to be important here to remember is the fact that from the very beginning, it felt like change was within reach, that President Yoon could be impeached, that something was to be done. A major reason, I think, why so many youngsters, not only in Korea, but all over the world, are thought to be so disenfranchised from politics is because it seems like whatever they're going to say is not about to change anything. This time, by gathering, it felt like they would be able to get some sort of immediate outcome. That was the impeachment. So that's a mixture of many things. There is a historical legacy that is intrinsic to Korean political culture. There are obviously social networks that help people to gather. And there's also, I think, and that's probably the most important aspect here, the fact that for once it was possible to bring change, real change, immediate change.
Right. So, Professor, do you think this reflects a larger role then for our generation in shaping politics?
In shaping, I'm afraid maybe not. Because you see, these protests, you're always protesting against something. It is much more difficult to protest for something. So we know what young Koreans don't want. They don't want authoritarianism, and they certainly don't want the martial law. They're not rooting for the past. But when you think of all of the major issues that the youth is facing, not only in Korea, but all over the world, the main issue for Korea now is that basically there is no future for the youth. We know it is what Koreans call opposite, the young generation that has to give up on everything. So shaping a new future will mean shaping new policies, will mean giving the youth a voice with specific policies for more equality, for everybody to have a voice in politics. And for me, these protests are interesting because there is enthusiasm and they tell us not what to do, but they do not tell us yet what to do. I'm not saying, of course, the whole phenomenon, in my opinion, is one-sidedly positive because when people meet up, they think, but they talk. So they will start debating politics. So for me, all of this is a change to renew political discussion in Korea, for people to come up with new solutions, new issues as well that are not discussed in Korean politics, but also new solutions. However, how is it that better policies for the youth could result from all of this remains, in my opinion, quite unclear at the moment. We need more time to be able to see all of this in retrospect.
Hi, Professor. I have one last question for you. In your opinion, what's the ideal relationship between young people and political involvement?
That's a very big one. The short story here is that almost by nature, leaders tend to be older than protesters, because leaders are people who have been elected, and so it takes years and years before getting where they are. So in reality, the relation between political rulers and the youth is almost the same as the relation between people who decide, the leaders, and citizens in general. So the ideal relation will be about finding a way for the young to get heard. They have found that. And that's what's most remarkable about this event. Then the next step is, what do we do with all of this? How do we take it from there? And so the question is now, in my opinion, about how to find a way for all of this intellectual magma, so to speak, to take shape, so it translates into specific policies, into specific propositions. We are not there yet, but it can come. The last time Park Geun-hye was impeached, you had the same wind of enthusiasm blowing all over Korea. So we are in a similar situation now, and we need to do better to address the issues that the youth is facing, namely finding a home, finding a job, making it possible for people to have a real life and not to stay stuck in the situation we are in now.
All right, that was Professor Christoph Gaudet, Professor of Political Science at Korea University. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so the passing of the impeachment motion doesn't mean this political crisis is over. There is still a long road ahead. We have to wait for the final call from the Constitutional Court on President Yoon's impeachment and consider what that decision will mean for the country's future. So there's a lot of political and social uncertainty still lingering. So ending off, how do you think, as part of the younger generation, we can better navigate through the situation?
Well, very briefly, as we've shown until now during this turmoil, we must continue fact-checking and believe in the strength of democratic constitutions and respect the outcomes of the Constitutional Court as well.
What about you, Brooke?
Well, I think our guest said it best. I think the best thing you can do is make sure that your voice is heard. Be sure to be safe about it. Take care of yourself and the others that are all working towards a common goal. Remember that unity and solidarity are what are going to get us through this tumultuous period. So lean on your fellow citizen, keep fighting the good fight, and hopefully we will put this behind us soon enough.
Right, and we'll bring you more relevant updates and issues here on Newsgen as well. And that's all from us today, but Newsgen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Chae-ji-gi.
Thank you.
Thank you, and Brooke Prince.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.